Okay, so recently my power antenna stopped working for whatever reason. I parked it in the backyard and then suddenly it decides it doesn't want to work. So I turned the ignition on so you can hear the motor's trying to work. So something else is going on. Now I can't move this. I know that inside here, the plastic rod that goes inside is still attached. Something's happening with the motor down the bottom. I'm going to take the wheel off and take the inner shielding off to get access to where the motor is and take it out. I'm not too sure. I haven't had a problem with power antenna. 20 years. I know I've changed it before, but I don't remember if it was aftermarket or genuine, say, or whatever else I did behind there. But I know I replaced it once before because I went below a low tree and hit the antenna, snapped it. Okay, so I'll get the wheel off and I'll get the covering off, and the covering off is just little clips and screws, whatever. Just you can see what needs to come undone to remove all of that. I don't want to go into all that, and we'll just go straight to where the antenna is. Okay, so there's the access to the antenna here. Definitely aftermarket. Looks like I've used the original bracket here from the old antenna, but I've added another bracket there myself. You get earth wire here. Looks like I've used a couple of blue things to put the wire on. It's probably got enough wire there to, once I unbolt this, to cut me out. Then I have to undo the wire so I can pull the whole antenna through, and then I can open the antenna up and have a look what's going on the inside. I'm not going to be able to show you as I'm doing this, but basically just undo everything here so it's all loose. When it's coming out a bit, I can undo that wiring, pull the antenna through. Okay, so here's the antenna out. You can see it's broken from the bottom here, and that feels pretty tough there. It's like it's soft here, but it's tough there. Now, I could probably fix this, which means that I'd have a shorter antenna. It's not too much shorter. Yeah, I'll give that a go first before I go buy a new one. I've taken this off. This goes on top of that, washer and so forth, and then the cover. It's very basic to pull it apart. Nothing real technical about it. Now you can see this part here, that feeds through, and there's no clips or anything on it. It just smoothens out and it curls up into this as it goes down. The problem is the length of the antenna is going to be the problem. So I'll show you. So that's how much I've got to play with. Now the antenna stops when it's fully extended, so I have to try and work out if I can stop that antenna part way. Might have to damage it a little bit, we'll see. Okay, so what I'm looking at here is, this is how long it needs to be. I need it to be basically that much shorter, and I thought if I cut this tube down and cut that alloy there, I can make it shorter, but then I interfere with the distance from here to here with the installment, so I can't make any adjustments to this area here. What I need to do is either stop the tip coming out that far, so the tip could be into all the way to here, like so. That'll make it a thicker part of the antenna there, or one of the middle pieces to go in. So I decided to put JB Weld on the second extension that comes out. Once that's dried up, it's not going to extend that, probably about 6 or 7 inches on that second piece that comes out. Now if you're wondering why I've got the tape on that plastic part there, because when I slid the antenna down over it, they kept on catching, so I used a bit of tape to help hold the plastic together there. It's kind of off roundish sort of thing, so it just made it a little bit easier to slide that back on. So this is at 4 times speed, just to hurry it up a little bit. So I first put it all back on, realised it wouldn't fit. It's kind of like getting stuck in the way there, and it was just the part where I JB welded was just a little bit too thick. So I centered that down and slid the antenna back on, and So you can see there that the yellow tape helped me slide that in there. And I pushed it back in there. Now I've just got to work out that the rod that goes inside the antenna, it goes into the thing that it winds into. That part there I'm looking at is where there's two bits of alloy joined. I don't know why they made it so it separates, but that clamp is what was on it in the first place, so I clamped it back on. But I realized after this I should have JB welded that there as well, because when I put it in the car it separated and I had to rejoin it while it was all bolted up underneath the guard. It didn't join together how it was when I was outside the car, but it's good enough, it's working. So I'm just looking at how that there comes on and trying to work out what happens there. So that's actually a guide that the rod comes up underneath and then it goes over. Now this next bit is a little bit tricky. Just putting that wheel on, you just have to get in there and you just have to just kind of press down and feed that rod inside the wheel there. I don't know what else to call it. And then once I was happy with how it all looked, I decided to put it all back together and give it a test. Now the JB weld's probably dried about 15 minutes to half an hour, something like that. I wasn't really timing it, but I felt it was long enough to test the antenna. So I'm just trying to work out how I put it apart here and put it back together the proper way. And just tighten that 8mm nut down by hand. I'll be tightening it up again a little bit later by the ratchet, just before tightening it all back together properly. I'll just give it a test run. Now I'm just using a battery from one of my cordless drills that's 12 volt, and that's working as I hoped it would. And now just the top of the antenna, it goes on. Because it's aftermarket, that goes on first, but by memory I think the genuine one had the screw that came from the top, but with the aftermarket one, so it fits snug, that goes on first. And now just looking at putting the mounts on and everything, and so now I'm just putting the antenna back together, all the mounts, tighten everything up. And the mount, can tell how the mount goes on easy enough because there's a little bit of a water bleeder, if I think you would call it. So when water gets onto the antenna, it goes through there and then comes down to the plastic area, and so it doesn't fill up. There's like a little drain there. So the bracket goes on around it. You can't make a mistake there. It just won't let you put it on the other way around. And now tighten up that 8mm. Not too tight, just like you saw there, just a nip. And I'm just closely inspecting it, making sure that I didn't make any mistakes, that everything's happy. I'm pointing at the antenna there because I'm not really too sure if I put it in the right way around. So, but it doesn't matter because the coax underneath the guard was plenty long enough, so it wouldn't really matter which way that was. I can go back in and working antenna again. Don't know how long for, but you know, it's either that or pay $40, $45 for a new one, which I was about to do, but I figured let's try and fix this first. And yeah, all good. Well, we'll put it in the car tomorrow and see what happens. Before I put this back on, I just wanted to go over a couple of things now. If you bought a second-hand one, chances are this cable here, or this part here for where the coax goes onto, is probably part of the antenna. So you'd probably have to undo it from underneath the dash. What I would do is probably cut the coax at the antenna itself and on the new antenna and put a couple of joins on just screw it together there instead of having to go behind a dash. For me, that would be a lot easier. And this part here, rather the motor. Now, I've experienced this a couple of times with putting in aftermarket ones in other cars, that they only last about 2 weeks, maybe a month, and then they fail because the solder joints inside fail. So if you bought yourself a cheap aftermarket one, what you want to do is open it up and redo the solder joints inside first, so everything's in place, because when those wires come off and you don't know which one belonged where, it can be a bit tricky. So what you want to do is, with a cheap aftermarket one, I don't know if expensive aftermarket ones would be any different, so probably just a good idea, if you buy an aftermarket one, pull it apart, redo the solder joints first before you install it. And yeah, just be mindful of that there when you buy a new power antenna, if it has the connection that you need, and or prepared to buy a couple of coaxial joiners if it has a lead and you don't want to go behind a dash. So I don't know how long this is going to last me. Hopefully it lasts me years, but next time it fails, I'll replace it. I didn't intend on fixing this to start off with. I was going to replace it, but then I thought, we'll just give it a go, and turned out all right. And you saw me putting it together. I was next door playing music really loud last night, so I couldn't talk. But if I was to do it again, what I'd do is the original, I would make this stay into the antenna. What I tried to do was make it stay original, as much original as possible, so I wanted to keep that tip coming out all the way. But if I just glued that tip in that first part there, the rest of it would have just all bolted in like normal, and I would have had a heap of that plastic, what am I going to call that, like rod that turns around. I would have had heaps of that to be able to trim a little bit off and put it back together, and it would have been no dramas at all. Well, that's it. That's back in, and I don't know why this is designed the way it is, but when I put it in and operated it, that part that you saw me put together separated again. So I don't know why it designed that way, but anyway, it didn't separate by much, so I just clamped it to the top part, and it's going to stop it from pushing up any further. So what was happening is this plastic part here was pushing up a little bit because that was separating, but it's functioning quite fine. And I've had to, obviously I've done this before, so I've had to put it back the way it came out. So this is an original mount that's supposed to go behind that nut, but I've got above because the antenna must have been too short way back when I first installed it. Plus I put this mount back in to stop that from moving a bit, and I used BP connectors this time to put the wiring back together, and the antenna's working quite fine. So yeah, I'll just give you a look at that. I'm just going to put all the covering back in. There you go, bit of improvisation, because all these little plastic things, these things are useless. So just use the top of one as a washer, and put a screw in there instead. Good enough. There's your mud flap. Now I used to have really good alloy ones here that I custom made, had Ford badges on the other side and everything for all 4 tyres of the car, but somebody knocked them off, so I just had to make some dummy rubber ones, but they do good enough. There you go, happy days. Till next time guys, cheers. Custom DIY mud flap. I like how the Falcon, you can slide it in behind there, anything you want. For me it's just a flat bit of rubber that'll slide in behind there, like so. Instant mud flap. Nice easy one.